in tandem in our HOPE team, which is our homeless outreach team. They
Uh-huh.
actually ride along probation and behavioral health ride with our deputies and go
Okay.
into the homeless camps and deal with the homeless population because that's
Mhm.
a better way to deal with that group of individuals that most often they have addiction issues and mental health issues. And so if a group of folks show up that can deal, we have law enforcement if they need it. We have probation if they're on probation. We have behavioral health and we can get them help, which can also funnel into public health as well. So that approach works really well with the homeless population, but they're not 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They
Mhm.
work a specific schedule and they focus on that population. In the field, the calls that were described in the presentation, um, somebody acting out or somebody running around naked or whatever, uh, behavioral health in our county will not go to those calls. They'll come later, but they're not going to respond to deal with that specific person until the situation is under control, whatever looks like.
Mhm. Yeah, it does seem like intuitive that it is not going to be one size fits all. Jurisdictions have a variety of different issues given geographics, other issues, but maybe we can be working towards like some general arching principles, but then here are some models, very different models for different, needs perhaps, or just different approaches, and we're helping and to evaluate them in our report and to be informative to the public and to really like see, what seems to be working and what doesn't and the reasons why they may be or be not working.
I would agree. I think there's a lot of different options and that can be used and depending on your jurisdiction and what works best for you. And so I think maybe that's an important step. And then back to the dispatch for just a second. Uh, Post provides the basic dispatcher course, and so all dispatchers now are required to complete the dispatch course, and they're also required to complete CPT, continuing professional training, just like officers are. So that discussion about um, checklists or additional training for dispatchers is very easy to incorporate if it's not already. And I'm just not sure of the curriculum, but if it's not already, it's very easy to incorporate in through post in either CPT or in the basic or both.
I would think would have to come from a best practices because I talked to the manager of dispatch for an agency, I think UCSF, and they said they don't have that particular training as of yet. And recall this whole topic of bias by proxy is fairly new over the last couple of years, and so it needs to be created by someone or some entity or some organization that drills it down to the responsibilities of dispatcher. I don't want to blame dispatch because it could end up being what's dispatcher's responsibility to make sure, but it's also the officer's responsibility to ask dispatch questions. It's also the police officer's responsibility to make a phone call probably to the reporting party to get more information. So it's a lot and it's going to take time, but I think it's necessary.
If it's not in there, it's pretty easy if there's a recommendation from the RIPA board to post. Post can put together a group of subject matter experts inside and outside of law enforcement to come up with recommendations on what the curriculum should include. And then they put together the class, whether it be an hour long online or a 2 hour long, whatever it might be. But it can count towards CPT, which is important because the dispatchers need that. And as long as it's post certified and they get subject matter experts to help develop it, pretty easy to incorporate that into the CPT.
My recollection is that Post currently has a general training or has training for dispatchers, but that there isn't a lot that they're covering or had been covering on the particular issue, the bias by proxy. So, that may be something.
We can fix that. We can come up with some recommendations I'm on the post commission as well, so I can have some conversations with Manny if we get to that point. He's great, so it's really easy to do, and they need their CPT, so we need to fill it with something that's meaningful and valuable.
Great. Comments by any of the board members before we go
I
ahead and
have just one. I was really struck by Director Smuts, I think his name was, from San Francisco. His diagrams that showed the area A, B, and C calls and where Cahoots was and where they were. And as Sheriff Mann is suggesting, I think that there are probably different programs for different situations, and the nature of those calls are complex and heterogeneous. And maybe so if we're going to write about that, that might be a good way for us to think about, the different ways that we might think about, creative ways to respond to behavioral health calls and when law enforcement needs to be there and when not. And I just thought it was a great way to frame things. He had his whole caseload right there, and he's like, okay, we're taking some from this, and we plan to move into this direction. And it was in my mind, it sort of brought it to life.
Okay, this was the squares, A, B, and C. Yeah.
Very cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Any other comments?
Just one
No?
quick thing for the board.
Okay.
We did want to let you know that we've begun discussions with Post regarding the dispatchers training course. And we're hoping to continue to learn more from Post about dispatchers basic training regarding bias by proxy. And we've begun to learn more, and it's certainly an area the board seems to be interested in. So perhaps we could ask them to come and speak to the board at the next meeting if that's something folks are interested in, or if the board would be interested in reviewing possibly the dispatcher's basic course itself. That's something we could also look into. So we have reached out. So if there are specific things the board is interested in looking at, like the basic training course, we can certainly reach out.
Great. I mean, I think if they could come and speak to us about both of these issues, what in the current training, what is being covered with respect to bias by proxy and the crisis, individuals in crisis would be helpful. I don't know if anybody else, if the board members disagree or think of something, differently, but that's okay. Yeah. So it looks like as a subcommittee that, we would like to continue exploring then kind of, the path we've been on to, continue working on those issues with respect to the bias by proxy, to maybe we can ask the staff if we can do a deeper dive into that 5% of the data, that we have, and to see if then there may be more information that can be gleaned from the data we already have, in addition to doing, research and tracking these other programs that are out there right now, like today's, program that we learned about. So I think that, we were making good progress. So if we don't have any other comments from the board, I'm going to open it up to a second public comment. And I will, as last time, and if somebody, if you're not getting through, and you may want to ask us if you can hear us, and if we don't hear a response, you can, call, in the chat, there's the number to actually call in with your phone. But if you're having problems, you can put in the chat that you're having problems, so that we know you're out there trying to reach us. So I'll start with Northern California. Do we have any public comment from Northern California? I don't hear anything. I look in the chat. I don't see anything. So I'll move it to Central California. Do we have any public comment from Central California? Okay, then I'll move it to Southern California. Any public comment from Southern California? Okay. Doesn't appear we have any public comment. So with that, we can talk about next steps. And I guess I'll start. I mean, from as I think I just mentioned, I'll just reiterate, based on our conversation, that as a subcommittee, we would like to continue to do work both on the issue of bias by proxy, as well as the calls that involve the mental health issues, and that to continue with the bias by proxy, looking into, additional models, asking Post to come speak to the subcommittee, both on that issue and the calls involving individuals with a mental health crisis, and looking at potential best practices that are very concrete for law enforcement with respect to potentially, scripts that can be used, or that we could, ask Post to be looking into and talking to other experts on that for dispatchers, as well as continuing to look at best practices for the restorative justice process and principles that we talked about in our 2021 report. And then with respect to calls that are involving individuals that are having a mental health crisis or in distress, that, following and learning more about the program that we learned today and looking at the data that they are going to be looking at when they are going to be making that public, and the evaluations, and looking at other programs and other models, with the idea that we would likely want to present a number of different models that some may be more appropriate than others for different jurisdictions. And I don't know if I remember the other point to follow up with respect to the bias by proxy issue is to take a little bit of deeper dive into the data that we already have, the stop data, to see if there's anything we can glean from that. Anything I'm forgetting? Sandra or others on our board?
No, that's a lot. I think that's excellent summary. I think both of those are going to be pretty deep, but Felicia has something.
I just had a quick question about the Post dispatcher, and since that's our next steps, asking them to come talk about it. The person that comes, if it's possible to have either someone who currently is a dispatcher or recently a dispatcher, very similar to having like the experience of law enforcement here. I think it's so helpful to actually get the experience of a dispatcher too, and to hear directly from them what thoughts they have in terms of some of the things that we're naming right now.
I really like that idea, or even learning about what, the experience is like.
I can facilitate that if need be. Just let me know. Can have one of our supervisors or our manager come and be part of this discussion as well. Can also talk about what the training includes and CPT and all of that as well. So happy to help do that if you want me to.
Great. Well, I think that'd be great. So we can work on that for a presentation. Okay. So with that, I think that looks like we're almost exactly at 4:30. That's amazing. And I think this has been a really productive meeting. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to all our members of the public for joining us today. Thank you to our Department of Justice staff for continuing to do just an amazing job in your work and supporting our subcommittee and the board, and thank you to our subcommittee board members. So I hope everybody stays well and has a good rest of your week. Thank you.